Okay, so there's an assumption, a glaring assumption that often happens in work relating to masculinities that often doesn't get named and often doesn't get real attention to. And it's this. How do we know that the people that we're speaking to with masculinity know what masculinity actually is? And I don't mean this from a position of haughtiness, by the way, of like, we sure people know what they're talking about? Because I know I do. That's not what this is. But what I think is important is that we're actually naming this assumption that when we're speaking about masculinity to people, specifically young men in education, that they just know what we're talking about. Yeah, they can track, they can follow, they see it online all the time, right? So of course they know what we're talking about. Because what I've seen in my work and what I frequently tell people who work with young men and masculinities in the spaces that I hold is that young men and masculinity specifically don't have a working definition of masculinity. If you ask them to define masculinity, they don't have a definition. They're not sure what it is. They often kind of lean into this. Well, I've heard it from this person. I see it on this page. Or I've heard this specific, voice on this in my life, or this specific, figure in my life talking about it in this way. But I don't really know what it is. I hear about it all the time, but I don't actually know how I would define it. And that's important. That's important to actually name because often the assumption that yeah, these young people can track, they know what we're talking about, can actually bypass a really potent opportunity for real, congruent dialogue. The kind of dialogue that goes, actually, this is really confusing for you, isn't it? Actually, this is really disorientating for you, isn't it? It's actually really uncertain for you. Like this conversation doesn't feel like secure in the sense of you know what was being discussed. So what is actually happening for you in this space? Is it a load of different messages and a load of different perspectives that make it really difficult for you to know what's what? Is it the fact that you're hearing one specific message over and over, but you don't know if that's true? You're just kind of trying to work out if that feels right. Is it that you just don't hear about it from your own personal experience, so you don't actually know what's being discussed? These assumptions that boys know what we're talking about when it comes to masculinity just because they're online and just because they might be adjacent as an age group to some of the content and some of the ideas that other boys in their age group might be seeing and might be contacting is an assumption that can often lead to not very fruitful conversations. And it goes back to an episode I did a while back now around different ideas and presentations of masculinity, different lived experiences, this intersectionality that's really important. And it's not to say that young men and boys, aren't hearing about masculinity just because they've never heard of it before. They have ideas of what it means to be a man and what they think being a man means. But the actual term masculinity for them feels quite distant at times or quite, as I've mentioned, disorientating or confusing. And our assumption of we know what these boys are watching and engaging with, what they're talking about, and they'll be able to kind of fit in and lock into the conversation can bypass a really important relationally positive and rapport building activity, which is this is confusing for you, isn't it? Or what assumptions am I making about you as an age group? Because I thought that you would have had an understanding of this, but clearly you don't, and that's okay. But like help me to understand what's happening for you at this point in relation to what you might see in these areas. What are we missing? What are we not seeing? What are things that are important for us to think about as a collective in this space? And I wanted to talk about this because, again, I'm in a bit of a posture right now in the work that I'm doing that is really going back to the foundational things of what are we frequently overlooking in conversations around masculinity that frequently position the conversation in a direction that might actually bypass a lot of the real necessary naming work. And for me, that assumption that boys just know what masculinity is an assumption that shuts down a lot of feelings about the current conversation. And what I've observed over the time that I've been approaching the conversation in this way, what is masculinity? Hands up if you've got an idea of what masculinity is. Very few boys put their hand up with a sense of, I know what it is. Whether it's right or conceptually right or whatever is irrelevant at this point. The amount of boys that put their hand up and go, yeah, I think I know what masculinity is very small in comparison to the hands that go up that go, uh, I, 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 I don't know. Like the hands stay down for, are you sure? Like, most of the time the hands stay down. Very few hands go up. But when I ask, is anyone not really sure? Most hands go up in the air. And it's important that we spend time digging around in that soil. What is it about it that's confusing, or what is it about it that feels like you're not sure? Like that gives us information to help us have those necessary conversations with the young people that we serve. But assuming that, oh, you're online, you'll get it. You've seen those people. I'm sure you've seen those influencers. They might have, but they might not have proximity to them. They might not have deep awareness of them. That might not be the lens through which they're building an idea of masculinity through. And having the time to dig in that soil and check our assumptions not only helps us to locate the young people that we're working with, but it also sends a message to the young people that we're working with too. I am working with you, not just talking at you. I'm not just giving you the answers. We're working it out as a collective. Those things really help young people in this context, young masculinities, to engage in conversations congruently and authentically. So I wanted to add this into an episode and just really talk about it because I feel like it's an assumption that often gets in the way of maybe some of the most fruitful and calibrating discussions around masculinity. So I'll link a couple of sources in the description that might be useful for you to kind of understand a little bit about the voice of young men and masculinity. It's UK. The context is UK centered just because of where I'm positioned. But there is some really useful information in there that is, pertinent to a lot of people that work with young men and masculinities, that might be useful in terms of checking our assumptions about what young men specifically are constructing in relation to their ideas or lack of ideas relating to what is masculinity. So I hope you found this episode useful. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in a future episode very, very soon. Stay well, stay blessed, and remember, check those assumptions curiously, compassionately, and intentionally. Stay well now. Bye bye.